Hi everyone, it's Karen here and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a new tutorial. It's an art journaling step-by-step tutorial using stencils and sprays. I'm using Marabu sprays and stencils from the Crafters Workshop. And I created this art journal page inspired by Frida Kahlo. I'm working in my Joggles 6x9 disc-bound art journal, and I took the page out of the journal because it's so easy to work with it when it's flat. That way it doesn't warp in your journal and it's much easier to apply all the mediums. All the products and links are listed below in the description area. I started by creating the base of my background. I took two Marabu spray colors, Sunshine Yellow and Tangerine, and covered the whole background with these two colors. Then I heat set the colors really well so I could add different colors even if they are not warm colors like this one. The Marabu art sprays are permanent once they're heat set, so they're perfect once you dry them so you can add a second layer. I took a stencil from the Crafters Workshop and I sprayed some of the Reseda color, which is like a lime green color. I sprayed it in some areas and then stamped with the stencil with whatever was left on it. Then I took the raspberry color and I used another The Crafters Workshop stencil, and I went ahead and added a little bit of the raspberry fuchsia kind of color. So by randomly spraying in certain areas, it helps create this really nice distressed look to the background. I heat set these two colors so I could add the next layer of color. The nice thing about these sprays, like I said, is that once you heat them, they're permanent, and then you can add any type of color you want above them. I have several sizes of this disc-bound journal, and I chose this one to specifically have it facing horizontally, so it flips as if it's a calendar. That way, all my art journal pages are going to be horizontal. And what I do is that I use one page at a time. I only do one spread art journals instead of the double spread that I usually do. Once the second layer was dry, I went ahead and added some blue into the background. I took another stencil from the Crafters Workshop. This is the halftone stencil, and using the Caribbean color from the Marabu sprays, I added some circular pattern to the background. Then I heat set this as well. The next color I added was the darker blue, which is almost like a cobalt blue. It's called Gentian blue. And I took another stencil from the Crafters Workshop, and of course I'll list all of the ones I'm using today because I don't remember all the stencils names. And I just added a little bit of this pattern on the borders and some stars in certain areas. I just wanted to have it a little bit more textured and to add a little bit more pattern to the background. I then took a little bit of that leftover blue and I just filled in the borders on the actual pattern. And then I heat set this really well again. I continued with the same stencil and added a little bit more pattern since this stencil has a lot of really cool patterns for art journaling. And I used the Aubergine color, which is an eggplant looking color, kind of a dark purple. Then I went with the raspberry, back with the raspberry, and just added an extra pattern with the flower. I really wanted this to be kind of a busy pattern so I could later on put the face of Frida Kahlo. To stencil in the Frida Kahlo face, which is another stencil from the Crafters Workshop, I went ahead and I used some black impasto paint and dabbed it onto the stencil. This is more a mask than a stencil, and I was originally going to use spray paint to do this, but I knew that I wanted to get an exact impression of her face, and I knew that I had to use something thick enough that it will not run underneath the stencil. I did attempt to do it first with a palette knife, and that did not work, so I ended up removing it and adding it with this sponge, and that really helped to create that exact pattern of her face. The next step was to incorporate a little bit of white into the layout. I took a white impasto paint from Prima Marketing Finnabair and using another stencil from the Crafters Workshop, went ahead and created patterns with a vertical direction. This helped to create movement and make things flow towards the center of the layout. towards the face of Frida Kahlo, which is what I wanted to have. As you may have noticed, the face of Frida Kahlo was really busy. The pattern was really busy inside her face, and I really couldn't distinguish her features, which I did not like. So I figured I would have to color it in with some paint to kind of give it a contrast in between that and the background. So what I did is I started adding a little bit of lighter colors to her face. I started with the white and just doing her neck and painting a little bit of her neck to just kind of cover those busy patterns. However, the white was too strong and I didn't like how it looked. I felt like I needed to add darker colors. So I took a wipe and just removed some of it, and then I went with other colors. I started with the pink and started adding some pink tones to the face and just played around with the different tones. I went and mixed it a little bit with the white, and then afterwards I started adding darker colors as well. So as I was adding the darker colors, I tried creating shading in her face because that helped cover those busy patterns and also helped create her face. I also added a little bit of orange. I used all impasto paints to color this in. And although I'm not an expert in painting, I kind of know some of the rules of the shading, and I left the right side of her face a bit lighter while the left side of her face I started doing it a little bit darker, as if the light was hitting from where the yellow was in the art journal background. I went in again with a darker color. This is a fuchsia looking color, and I will get all the names below after. I just can't remember the names of them. And this one, again, I added only on one side of her face just to accentuate that side and create those shadows, and blended it with the lighter color. So although I'm not an expert in painting, I really liked what I was doing, and it kind of helped me learn how to put the shadows. This is what art journaling is all about. Besides the great message and the great release that it gives me emotionally, I really like it because I learn how to do a lot of things, and I don't really care if I don't get it exactly right because it's all a learning process. So what I'm doing here is learning from this, and then I can go on next time and do this again. I realized that I also covered the nose, so later on I will go through with it and I will highlight and outline everything again. I also added a little bit of yellow and blended the pink with it. I added the yellow in the lighter areas as well. That way it really looked like the face had shadows. So as I said, I'm not sure if I shaded the face properly, but I'm very happy with my attempt and I really like how it came out. The fact that I used colors that are not conventional for a face made it a little bit easier because it wasn't perfect. Finally, I took the same exact colors that I had used, which is the orange, the yellow, and the pinks, and I created beautiful flowers on her head. Because the flowers ended up being black when I masked them with a stencil, I wanted to create my own flowers, and I recently learned how to make really nice flowers with a palette knife. So all I had to do is just mimic the flowers that I had learned how to do in a class that I took, and I just went ahead and created the same thing. So all you have to do is use your palette knife and create circular motions of the colors, and then add another color on top while the other one is still wet. And these create these really cool loose flowers, almost like roses, but they're pretty loose, and you can create them in different colors. So some of them I started with the yellow and then added the orange. Some I started with pink and then added the pink and then added the yellow. And some I added the fuchsia looking color right at the top. So that would create different tones and shadows to the flowers. And you can create as many flowers as you want as long as you're creating a beautiful headdress for Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo always wore those beautiful flowers on her head, and she painted herself that way too. So I really wanted to mimic that idea. I heat set everything really well, especially those flowers at the top, because I wanted to outline the whole layout. Her face, the flowers, and everything, all the features that I had stenciled. But I couldn't do that until everything was very dry. Once it was all dry, I took my black Posca pen. This is a 3mm black Posca pen, and I started highlighting her face, her eyes, and basically everything on her neck and her ears. And then I went ahead and added some outlines to the flowers as well. One of the flowers were still a little bit wet, but I managed to kind of work around it to make sure that I didn't get the pen all marked up with paint. Even though this is a paint-based marker, I didn't want yellow or orange on it. I also created some leaves that were coming out of the flowers, so that kind of tied it all in because the stencil had the leaves already on it, but I had covered them with the flowers, so I just needed to go back and outline a few of the leaves and some of the flowers and really make them stand out. I also, of course, added the outline of the nose and the nostrils so it will look more realistic. I took the black art crayon from Marabu and I created lines across the edges of the borders and then just blended them with my finger to create a nice dark border around it. I really like framing my art journal pages. It's something that I prefer doing. I like how they look all framed, but you don't have to do that. Then I took a famous quote by Frida Kahlo and I just ended up writing it with my black pen onto the background. I could have done other things like printing it out or just using a labeler, but I felt like my writing would be perfect for this and I just wanted to include that. So I just wrote out, I picked a quote that I really liked from the internet, and that's the one I wrote onto the background. Finally, I took a white jelly roll pen and I added some lines and highlights to the face, to the flowers, to the eyes, to just add those finishing touches to everything, to the lips. That way it would really look like it's tied in and it really makes the face stand out. I love working in this art journal because it's so easy to work on a flat surface and not have to wiggle around inside a very uneven book. So it is so easy to remove the pages and also put them back together. And here I am adding the pages back into my journal because it's so easy. And I really like that this journal has a different orientation, that it's all horizontal, which all my journals are not. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked my video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends in social media. For more inspiration, visit me on my website and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much and have an amazing day. Bye!